God turns your past sins into blessings. There is no power in heaven or on earth that holds your past against you, except the memory you keep alive within yourself. What you call sin, mistake, or failure is not a life sentence. It is raw material in the hands of the divine within you, waiting to be transfigured. Every sorrow you've buried, every regret you've rehearsed, every shadow you've tried to outrun, they are not there to condemn you. They are invitations, for within you is the creative power of God, and that power does not judge, it transforms. Your past is not a chain but a seed, and when seen rightly with imagination and love, even the most painful chapters of your story begin to bloom into blessings. Nothing is wasted, nothing is beyond redemption. That which once caused you to bow your head in shame can become the very thing that lifts your life to glory. You are not here to pay for the past. You are here to awaken to who you really are, one with the power that can take every misstep and make it serve the fulfillment of your deepest desire. Imagination redeems the past. Consciousness is the only reality. You are not a victim of time, nor a slave to history. Your past does not live outside you. It lives only in your consciousness. This is the foundation of all true spiritual understanding. Consciousness is the only reality. Everything you have ever experienced, everything you now see, feel, touch, or remember, exists only because you are aware of it. And if your awareness changes, your experience changes. The past is not behind you. It is within you, and it responds to your present state. When you identify with guilt, shame, or regret, you are not being punished by an external force. You are simply living from a state of consciousness that reproduces those feelings in your world. The past, no matter how long ago, takes its meaning and power from the state you occupy now. A man who has awakened to his divinity can look upon the same event that once broke him, and find in it the roots of his strength. What changed, not the event, but the man, not the facts, but the level of consciousness through which those facts are interpreted. Everything in your world is a reflection of your inner state. Your relationships, your opportunities, your obstacles, even your so-called enemies, they are all mirrors of yourself, concept. When you accept this, you stop trying to fix the outer world and begin to ascend within. You realize that no experience can be greater than your assumption of yourself. If you see yourself as unworthy, the world must echo that belief. If you see yourself as loved, forgiven, and blessed, the world has no choice but to reflect it. It cannot do otherwise. It is law. This is why God turns your past sins into blessings, not by altering history, but by lifting your state of consciousness. The very things you once cursed become the sacred vehicles through which you awaken. You begin to say, had I not gone through that, I would not be who I am now. And in that moment of realization, the sin is no longer a sin. It is a blessing in disguise. The outer facts remain, but the inner meaning has changed. And in spiritual law, meaning is everything. Do not look to the world to confirm your transformation. Look within, feel the truth of your new state. Assume the consciousness of one who is already redeemed, already loved, already whole. Then watch how the outer world bends to reflect that truth. Even people from your past may return, not to remind you of guilt, but to confirm your growth. Events may arise that appear to validate your revision. But understand this, they are not causes, they are effects. The cause was always your state of consciousness. You do not need to be ruled by what was. You need only to dwell in what is possible. Your imagination, when accepted as truth, lifts you out of the old and into the new. And when you change the state you live from, the entire world, including your pastor, ranges itself to honor that shift. This is not magic. This is law. This is truth. And the truth is, your past has no power over you unless you give it power through your consciousness. Revision is the key to transformation. There is no situation too far gone, no memory too dark, no failure too final that it cannot be transformed through the spiritual act of revision. Revision is not an escape from reality. It is the reshaping of reality. For what you call reality is not a fixed thing. It is a reflection of the assumptions you hold within. To revise is to exercise divine power, the creative authority given to you before the foundation of the world, to see what was and claim what ought to have been. You must understand this. The past is not dead. It is alive in your imagination. It revisits you in the form of emotion, limitation, fear, and recurring patterns. What you have not transformed, you continue to relive. But God, your own wonderful imagination, does not ask you to carry the past like a burden. It invites you to redeem it, to reimagine it with love and wisdom, and in doing so you do not just change how you feel, you change who you are. And who you are creates your world. Think of a painful event, a conversation that ended in bitterness, a decision that brought loss, a moment that haunts you still. Now realize this: the event lives only in memory, and memory is imagination. Go back, re-enter the scene not as a victim but as a creator. Change the words spoken, change the atmosphere, see yourself calm, loving, wise, feel the peace of a different outcome, and then drop the original memory and carry only this revised scene in your heart. This is not pretending, it is spiritual surgery. The revised scene, once impressed upon the subconscious, becomes the new seed from which your future unfolds. The world may rearrange itself in quiet and mysterious ways. Old conflicts may dissolve, people you thought lost may reappear or vanish from your life in peace. Circumstances will shift, not because you forced them to, but because you assumed a new identity, and reality must conform. You are not bound by what has happened. You are bound only by what you refuse to reimagine. And most people refuse not because they cannot, but because they do not believe they have the right, but you do. God gave you imagination not to fantasize, but to revise, not to escape, but to transform. And when you revise with love, not resentment, not anger, but love, you align yourself with divine intention. For love is the creative force, and revision is its tool. You will come to see that every so-called sin was simply a moment you had not yet revisited in light. And as you revise them, your life begins to flow in new directions. Peace returns, confidence grows. Opportunities emerge, you walk lighter because the heavy past no longer clings to you. It has been rewritten at the root. The world will call this coincidence. You will know it as truth, for you have touched the eternal law, as within, so without. You have discovered the key. Revision is not just a technique. It is the way you reclaim your power, rewrite your story, and rise into the life you were always meant to live. The law of assumption transcends karma. There is a belief, widespread and persistent, that every action must be repaid in kind, that the universe is a strict accountant, keeping track of every wrong, every misstep, every sin. This belief is called karma, and while it appears just, it is rooted in a misunderstanding of spiritual truth. Karma, as commonly taught, makes man a prisoner of his past. But you are not a prisoner. You are not at the mercy of past deeds. You are the operant power, the creative consciousness that can rewrite every script and transcend every law of retribution by one higher, the law of assumption. What is the law of assumption? It is the truth that what you assume to be true of yourself and others, with feeling and conviction, will harden into fact. Assumption is not wishful thinking. It is belief felt as reality. It is the act of claiming a state internally before there is any external evidence. And this law, properly understood, overrides every limitation imposed by your so-called karma. Why? Because karma is only the shadow of unconscious assumption. Once you become conscious of what you assume, you are free to change it, and therefore free to dissolve karma itself. You are never punished for your sins, only by them, and you are never rewarded for your virtue, only through it. The law of assumption makes this clear. You assume a state of guilt, fear, lack, and life mirrors it. You assume a new state of peace, abundance, love, and life shifts accordingly. It is not personal, not judgmental. It is simply law. The moment you take full responsibility for your assumptions, you begin to walk above the law of cause and effect. You realize that your inner world is the cause, and your outer world is the echo. Imagine someone who lived in selfishness and cruelty, believing they must now suffer to balance the scales. They drag their shame like a chain, expecting hardship, and so hardship comes, not because some force decreed it, but because they have assumed guilt as their truth. Now picture that same person awakened to this higher law. They assume forgiveness, they assume freedom, they assume themselves to be new, and lo, life reshapes itself to reflect this new identity. The cruel past loses its power not because it is forgotten, but because it is no longer the operative assumption. A new self has taken its place. This is the spiritual meaning of redemption. You are not here to pay back some universal debt. You are here to awaken to your creative nature. The law of assumption is the bridge between who you were and who you choose to be, and the moment you walk in the assumption of your desired state, regardless of appearances, karma dissolves, not through struggle, but through transcendence. This is not to deny responsibility. You are responsible not for past mistakes, but for the states you now occupy. If you feel guilty, revise. If you feel unworthy, assume worthiness. If you fear punishment, dwell instead in the joy of having already been forgiven. You do not beg for mercy, you embody it, for the law works impersonally. It does not ask if you deserve your desire, it only reflects what you believe you already have. This is why Scripture declares, let the weak say, I am strong, and not I will be strong, and not I hope to be strong, but I am. That is assumption, and the world shaped by your I am will move to reflect it. The law of assumption does not care about your history. It only knows your identity. The world cannot help but mirror what you accept as true of yourself. You may ask, can it be that simple? Yes, simple, but not always easy. It requires courage to let go of the familiar identity, even one of suffering. Many have worn their karmic burden so long they feel naked without it. But freedom lies in the boldness to assume the best, to claim a new self, and to live from that truth as if it were already fact. That is the secret. Live from the end, not toward it. Assume your ideal now, and the old self will fall away like a garment no longer needed. What you assumed yesterday shaped today. What you assume now shapes tomorrow, and every so-called karmic pattern can be broken by a single assumption rightly felt. I am already that which I seek, assume it. Persist in it, and the law must fulfill it, for it has no will of its own. In this way, the law of assumption transcends karma not by denying it, but by rendering it obsolete. You are not here to settle scores. You are here to awaken to the divine power within, and use it to rise into the life you choose. That is your true destiny, not bound by past action, but freed by present assumption. All things work together for good. There is a mysterious truth that reveals itself only to the awakened soul. Nothing in your life has ever been wasted, not a single tear, not a single heartbreak, not one so-called failure or sin. All things, yes, all things, work together for good, not because they are good in and of themselves, but because you, the operant power, have the ability to extract meaning, beauty, and blessing from every experience through the creative force of consciousness. You may look upon your past with sorrow. You may see events that broke your heart, moments where you acted in ignorance, or years spent in darkness, but those moments are not fixed. They are not your identity. They are not the final word. They were the soil in which the seed of your transformation was planted. When rightly understood, every shadow becomes the contrast that reveals your light. Every limitation becomes the very pressure that pushed you inward to discover your divine self. It is easy to bless the joyful moments, but it takes a deeper insight, a spiritual vision, to bless the pain. Yet this is what all transformation demands. You do not grow by escaping your past, but by redeeming it. And you redeem it by assuming that it was never working against you, but always working for you. The law is clear. Life is not happening to you. It is happening through you and ultimately for you. When you shift your assumption from why did this happen to me, to this served me, you invite God, your imagination, to reinterpret your entire life. You begin to see how closed doors redirected your steps, how betrayals awakened your discernment, how delays protected you, how even the moments you regret most were essential to cracking the shell of ego, so the divine could emerge. This is not sentimental thinking. It is the recognition of a higher law, that your world is yourself pushed out, and even in unconsciousness, your deeper self has always been drawing you home. You may think, but I made such terrible mistakes, and yet here you are. Growing, seeking, awakening. Would you be on this journey without the pain that brought you to your knees? Would you have turned inward if the outer world had never disappointed you? The things you once called curses, in the light of awareness, become blessings in disguise. And more than that, they become power, for there is no authority in the world like the man or woman who has walked through fire and come out free. To declare that all things work together for good is not to whitewash tragedy. It is to reclaim your authorship. It is to say, I will not be a victim of my past. I will be its redeemer. And the tool by which you redeem is imagination. You imagine the outcome as if it were already glorious. You feel the fulfillment, the wisdom, the love, as if it had always been yours, and as you persist in this inner state, your outer world reshapes itself to confirm it. Even the people involved in your so-called wounds begin to change, or they disappear from your experience altogether. Life becomes smoother, lighter, more harmonious, not because circumstances have fixed themselves, but because you have shifted your assumption about what life is. You no longer expect punishment, you expect blessing. And life must obey that expectation, because consciousness is the only reality. The moment you assume that everything in your life has served a divine purpose, the chains of karma break. The story of sin becomes the story of awakening. The moments of regret become the sacred catalysts of grace. This is not a poetic idea, it is a spiritual law. When you revise your perspective, you revise your world. You cannot always change what happened, but you can always change the meaning you give it. And the moment you change the meaning, the past becomes a platform, not a prison. From this higher viewpoint, you begin to live with peace, with joy, with a kind of divine indifference to what the world calls loss or gain. For you have tasted a truth far deeper than appearances, that you are not at the mercy of life, you are its maker. In the end, you will look back and see that the broken places were where the light entered, that the confusion was a sacred fog that led you inward, that what you once feared was part of a divine design too vast for the rational mind to comprehend. You will say with conviction, not as a hope, but as a knowing, all things truly did work together for my good. What you remember as sin is not some eternal stain upon your soul, but a memory impressed upon consciousness, an imprint waiting to be rewritten. You do not carry the burden of the past because it is fixed. You carry it because you have not yet transformed your relationship to it. The power to redeem your past lies not in confession to another, nor in punishment or penance, but in the divine tool given to you from the beginning, imagination. Imagination is the creative faculty of God within you. It is not a fantasy, not a daydream, but the spiritual act of revision. When you revisit a past event and see it differently, feel it differently, you alter the emotional structure of that memory. And since all experience flows from state of consciousness, that change reshapes your present and future. The past lives only as a state in the now. Change the state, and the entire pattern of your life begins to shift. You may have memories of betrayal, guilt, shame, or failure. Perhaps you made decisions from fear or ignorance, but hear this, you were not wrong, you were asleep, and what the world calls sin is merely action taken from a mistaken identity. You believed you were separate, small, unworthy, and so you acted accordingly, but now you are awakening, and as you awaken, you do not bury the past, you redeem it. You take hold of it with your imagination and make it serve your transformation. For example, imagine a moment when you spoke cruelly, acted selfishly, or missed an opportunity. Now, instead of reliving it in regret, close your eyes and revise the scene. Hear yourself say the right words. See yourself acting in love. Feel the peace of having done the noble thing. Carry that feeling until it becomes more real than the original event. You have not merely changed a memory, you have rewritten the spiritual record. And the fruit of that new seed will appear in your life as new relationships, new opportunities, new inner peace. This is not denial, it is resurrection. The past you regret was a tomb, and imagination is the voice saying, Lazarus, come forth. It does not matter how many years have passed or how deep the pain, the moment you revise with feeling, the power of God moves. What was once a cause of suffering becomes the source of wisdom, compassion, and grace. You will begin to notice that people respond to you differently, as though the past had always been pure. This is how God turns your sins into blessings, not by erasing what happened, but by lifting you into a state where what happened no longer defines you. You become free, not because the past disappears, but because you have reauthored its meaning, and that is the gift of imagination. That is the redemption of time. You do not need to beg for forgiveness from above. You need only awaken to the truth that within you lives the power to forgive, and thereby transform every moment that has ever been.